What I try to differentiate with people is the difference between should and wishes, wants, and desires. And wishes, wants, and desires to me are rational because it's okay to want a Mercedes.
Right.
It's not like you should have one to be a better person.
Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and today is going to be a lot of fun. Even though it's tax day, we're still going to have fun on the Money and You Show. So that's a whole topic. We've been chatting. We could probably do a whole show on tax day, but I think maybe it'll weave its way into the conversation. I have two guests with me today, and I'm super honored to have Dr. Greg Cason.
Hi.
Pronouncing that right?
Yeah. Greg Cason. Yeah.
And Brian Gomez. And Brian is a producer on Dr. Greg's podcast, Off the Couch. And so today's going to be a great show because we're going to really get into psychology. As you know, if you watch the show at all, I talk a lot about your relationship with money, how you interact with it. And most of that is emotionally driven, and there's a lot of psychology behind that, only I'm not a psychologist. So I'm super excited to have somebody who can speak to that from a much deeper place of understanding of how all this works. And, you know, the whole world in personal development is talking about mindset, and especially money mindset and all kinds of things. And so we're going to really dig in today and have an expert help us understand some of these aspects of how we relate to money. So, welcome.
Excellent. Hello. I'll do my very best. It's great to be here with you.
I want you to just give a little background. You are a psychologist or psychotherapist?
No, I'm a psychologist. Okay. Well, psychotherapist is sort of that general term. It's just like, I don't know, like man, but you don't know what type of man they are. But yeah, so I'm like I'm a psychologist, I have a PhD in psychology from the University of Houston, and I also went to UCLA and Northridge and UT, Austin. So I have, a few schools behind me. Yeah. And so I've been practicing here in LA for about 25 plus maybe years. I'll have to think about it. I used to have a show on Bravo called LA Shrinks. Oh, cool. And now I have the podcast here, which is the Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, which Brian is on with me.
Yeah, great. And you specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy?
That is correct. Okay. That is looking at how your mind impacts your feelings and behaviors. But I think even that shortchanges it a bit. It incorporates all the aspects of functioning and even our environment and how we can improve our lives. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I kind of love that people hear the term because it is out there. I mean, I don't know that it was 10 years ago, but these days young people are talking about therapy a lot, and and they're talking about the things that they've done that have helped them. And so I think, so it's gotten some good press.
Yeah, it's been a big revolution because when I got into the field, I will tell you, what a way to disappoint your parents to say you're going into therapy. Right. And they're like, oh, but just don't complain about me. No, I'm going to go learn it in school. And they're like, oh, that's what a poor choice. But in fact, I think it was really the very best choice for me. I mean, I really followed my heart and it paid off, so it was good.
Yeah. It was actually my high school dream was to be a therapist, and I thought that's psychologist is what I was calling it back then. And I don't know, I got sidetracked in a variety of ways, but I feel like there's still part of me that really loves that.
Well, I think what's really great about your show is I really feel like you are a therapist. I mean, we could say a money therapist, but you really address all the same issues, all the same life issues. And as we can probably talk, money really is, well, in my profession, it's something we call a generalized conditioned reinforcer, which means money stands for everything else. So a conditioned reinforcer is like a token. So if you go into an arcade and you play games and you get tickets, then you get tickets stand for tokens that you can then purchase something with. Well, you can only purchase what's in that cabinet when you're in an arcade.
Right.
But when you're with money, you can purchase just about anything. Yeah. So it generalizes out from that particular venue. So that's what's really interesting about it. So money takes on this very special meaning in people's lives. That's why I think what you do really is psychology.
Yeah, thank you. I'm feeling really good about that.
I mean, that's why I was super excited to come on the show and like learn everything I could, because people don't talk about money like that.
I know. We say that in every show, and it's so crazy, and I feel like I know Dr. Greg and I are similar, in more of a similar age category. I'm hearing that people talk about it more I'm not exactly sure what generation
now I feel
you
like,
are, but
I'm 31.
Okay.
But I've seen a lot more on Instagram and like social media where people are talking about it more, where there's like this girl that I follow, and she always kind of tells us like what we should be doing money wise and how to make money work better for us, whether if we're traveling or shopping or anything like that, for like our generation in that sense.
Yeah, which I think is amazing, because I know my kids are getting all this financial information coming at them all the time. You mentioned the word should, which I think has always been money. I don't know. It's been a little problem with money, because people have been told what they should do, not always by people who know what they're doing. And also there's this, I don't know, there's a lot of shame around money, which maybe we can start there.
Let's talk about it, because, oh my God, you're speaking my language. The word should is one of my biggest preacher points, if you will, because should implies that you're doing something wrong. If you're not doing what you think you should be doing, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
So you automatically set up people into this black and white sort of, place. And where is that should coming from? Is the should coming from what is in life? Like, you should pay your taxes. I mean, we can talk about that, because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble.
Right.
That's a real should. The government, if we live in this country, we have to follow those rules. But should you buy, a Mercedes? I've heard people advocate that that's a real life should. I don't think it is.
Right.
There are probably just as safe, just as reliable cars that are much less money. I mean, but so the should really is different. What I try to differentiate with people is the difference between should and wishes, wants, and desires. And wishes, wants, and desires to me are rational, because it's okay to want a Mercedes.
Right.
It's not like you should have one to be a better person. And that's what I want to work on.
I actually love that, because there is this kind of tie-in with like, the more money you make, the more money you have. Somehow, in a way, the more, I don't want to say you're a better person, but it elevates you somehow in people's minds, or, and it's and in your own mind. So, I mean, I think for most of us, we feel like the more money we have or the more money we make, the better we are somehow, which I feel is also detrimental.
I think that's one of the worst. And when we're not one of those people that we see, we then have that shame you talk about, or let's say if we do present as one of those people, but we don't have the funds to back it up, we also feel that shame. We also feel like we're a fraud, we're faking it. Right. So really being okay with who you are is one of the biggest pieces that we can do, like to be okay and to accept yourself exactly as you are, no better nor worse, just like who you are. I think in one of your podcasts you talk about taking a 10,000-foot view. That's what I call it, like stepping back and looking at your life. I was
probably talking about that therapist.
Yes.
She, I think about her all the time. She made a huge difference in my life.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's amazing.
I had a lot of them. She was the one who made a big difference in my life. But
it's good to have one.
Yeah.
And, so I was thinking about that and just like what a brilliant way to step back, to step back and look at your life. But I also want people, when I do that with that kind of work with them, is also to, when they zero back in on their life, to accept themselves exactly as they are, like radical acceptance for the moment. So if you have, like I did, we were talking before the show, I got a huge tax bill yesterday and it threw me, talk about throwing you for a loop. I was very upset because I thought I did everything right this year for the very first time. Oh. Well, so I have a 0 batting average apparently.
Well, actually, you did do everything you were told to do. So I think you did do everything right.
Nonetheless, here came that bill. But and I wasn't prepared for it. So, I'm going to have to deal with that. I felt very bad and I was ashamed, and it was really a hard day yesterday. And it's funny to talk about it publicly, but the bottom line is, I think I threw myself off because it was so emotional. Yeah. The bottom line is it was so difficult, but I just had to kind of step back and go, this is what it is. This is real life. I have to see this for exactly what it is. And that's the only place I can go from is reality. I can't declare it shouldn't be that way and be angry and huff and puff. I could, but it would be a big waste of time.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I think the whole thing is really interesting from a relationship standpoint, because I always take it back to, you have this relationship with money, and you can do everything right, just like in another relationship, but there are disappointments. Things happen and then you're disappointed. So how do you deal with those disappointments? We tend to think, I guess, you do certain things with money and it's like this linear trajectory and it's all supposed to work out if you do certain things. But it's just like everything else. Things happen. You've got this plan and then you lose your job, or you've got a plan and then you get a tax bill that you didn't expect. And so, but life is always like that, right?
To use baseball analogy, curveballs.
Yeah. So what do you tell your patients? Because that's hitting them, I'm sure, when they're coming in to see you.
Maybe first I will empathize with them. Because it's a drag to have to go through that. And so I kind of look at that they're grieving in that moment, that they're in shock and then they need to grieve it. But then as we move through that, yes, part of it is radically accepting where you are and where can we go from here? Mm-hmm. Like what is our place to go? So that's when we start to develop a plan and start to go more into those things. So, and I think the empathy is actually a very important part. Oh, in another podcast you said you didn't know that. Oh, I think I wrote to you. I'm so sorry.
No,
so
I love
funny.
that. I thought that was
because you said empathize and
empathic or empathetic.
Empathic or empathetic. And
I love what you said.
I said I had to look that up 2 years ago when I was teaching a class.
But you also said you didn't. I'll remember this forever. This is how you remember what words to use, because you said empathetic has pathetic in it. So I
don't like it.
I'm with you on that. I'm going to go with that.
So I always use empathic for that exact reason. I don't like the pathetic word because I don't feel it's pathetic to empathize with somebody, you know. But to connect with somebody and to really have them resonate with you actually makes them feel stronger, because then they feel more connected. Mm-hmm. And then it helps them to be able to let go of the shame and the pain to be able to take a new action.
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. And I think with money, things feel very, like when you feel like you have to take money out of something to pay something, like it feels like it throws you so off your plan, and nothing's going to work out now because you had to have the setback. But I think over the years, 20 years from now, it's a non-thing. It really didn't necessarily impact anything. You can make up ground and make up, all kinds of things with money, just like you can with anything else. So true. When I went through school, I was all public school. I worked and I did financial aid and I had scholarships, but really it was just a hodgepodge of
like trying to limp through, I never thought I would pay off my student loans. Never, never, never. I mean, I thought I'll have these till I die. And eventually I did, you know, and so it's eventually you get there.
And in my mind, it was just setting the intention to pay them off. And then, now this is where I really want to ask you too about the whole subconscious thing, because I'm a big believer in setting an intention, putting it out there, like believing it's going to happen. And I don't know, things get put in motion. I mean, both in your mind, but also in reality, you start doing things like paying the loan payments. But what is going on in your mind, in your brain, when you start to either visualize yourself doing something or just deciding you're going to do something? Is there something that is going on there that helps you, it gives you an assist? That's
a good question. You know, Goethe had a quote like that. If you want to do something, believe it and start it. There's power in the action or something. I can't remember the quote. It was a good one. My podcast is filled with me not remembering things, by the way. But the mostly movie titles. But the bottom line is that when we make an intention, we're generally making a decision based on our beliefs and values. So I think in some ways, when you're making an intention, you're already putting yourself in line with how you already want to be. This is, I don't know that there's scientific backup on this. This is just what I think. But I think that once you put yourself in line with your own values and your own beliefs, it does start to make everything work together in sync. And so, yes, I'm a big believer in asking a question that you don't know the answer to and waiting for the answer.
That's good.
Because I do this with clients a lot. Like, they'll go, I just can't, I've been trying to obsess on this, or I'm trying to think. Just ask the question. You know, because I learned this in high school when I was editor-in-chief of the yearbook, and I couldn't, this is so goony, but I could not think of the theme for the yearbook, and I was struggling with it. And so finally I just said, I don't know how I came up with it, or maybe someone told me, I'll just put it aside. I need to find the theme of the yearbook. I don't know what it'll be. And one day when I was taking a shower, I had one of those moments, of course, when you're taking a shower or driving, I think those are the two, that you all of a sudden have that moment, and it came to me. So I think with intentions, with anything, we've got to let our minds do work for us. We don't have to do all the driving. Sometimes we can let it do the driving.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love coaching too is all about the questions you ask, and asking the wrong question is going to have a negative impact potentially. But asking good questions, your mind does. It just shifts into like, I'm going to find the answer to this. And if it's a question where the answer is most likely going to be some kind of a positive or an idea or something, it's pretty interesting. I'm fascinated by it.
But I do believe in it. I do believe it's good to, set yourself on a course.
Yeah.
And, one, you've got to do what you can as part of that course, but on another, know that you're on that course.
Right.
It's sort of like, I'm going on the 405. I don't have to think I'll arrive in San Diego, because one day you will, or, depending on the traffic day. But when you're on a freeway, and you'll eventually get to your destination.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I think money, there's kind of this idea. People think if they get the right job, or, if they just sort of put things in motion, you'll eventually get there. But you haven't defined there, for one thing. So I feel like that's a big part of it, is clarifying for yourself kind of what your intention is, and then asking yourself those questions, like, how would I do X, Y, or Z?
Well, and it's with that 405 or with that freeway example, you get on the freeway and you don't set an intention to where you're going.
Yeah.
You're just going to drive aimlessly and eventually run out of gas. So you do have to have a place you get off. I mean, or you're going to drive right past San Diego and end up in Mexico. So that's that, I mean, like, So people do the intention or the desire, and those setting those goals, I think, is extremely important.
Okay. I think that's great.
I liked on one of your other episodes where you talked about just doing it and not waiting.
Yeah.
That was like, I mean, like it resonated a lot, because it's like a lot of us say, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do. And like, but I'll wait until I get a better paying job to start saving or something like that, where it's like, we just need to do it.
Right. And the only reason I say these things is because I've made everything I've ever talked about on my show, I'm sure I've made that mistake of waiting or something else. So now I have this huge book of knowledge based on my sort of long life at this point.
But that's amazing, because there's nothing worse than an expert who hasn't lived life. Then all they're telling you is just book learning. Yeah. You know, book learning is great, but when you can back it up with life knowledge,
experience.
But just having experience sometimes just isn't enough either. So it really is that combination that you really can funnel your knowledge in a really positive direction. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I heard on your show was about self-compassion, and I can't remember, and immediately when I'm hearing that, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's so important with money, because there is all that shame, and there's all these mistakes, and everybody else is doing well, and I'm not. And I mean, especially if you get on social media, you know, you can get pretty overwhelmed by, I think they think they're making it easy, like, let me show you how to make money, and I mean, big amounts of money in 6 weeks or whatever. It's all crazy town. But I would think that feels very overwhelming.
Even in the city we live in, I mean, we live in LA, where people are here to like chase after their dreams. So you are surrounded, your peers are all doing great things, great jobs, great money coming in. And it's like, if you're not doing the same thing or making the same money, or, you know, success-wise aren't on the same level, it kind of feels like you're doing it wrong, you know?
Yeah. And of course, as you know, a lot of this is a myth. I mean, a lot of this looks like people are doing really well, but I mean, I'm assuming, because I see it in my practice, I see it just in the business world in general. Their businesses look amazing, and, you know, they're not, I mean, if you actually dug into their numbers, they're not as amazing as some of them look. I mean, some of them are, but, you know, people tend to project kind of this idea of what they want their business to be. And, you know, maybe that's sort of the setting intention. I don't know what that is, but it is difficult for people just observing it and thinking. And then what is that when you take it in and make that like
internalize it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but I think you're making a really great point, and it may be very regional to LA, because I didn't observe it as much in New York. When I was in Houston, I really didn't observe it as much. There was a lot of gaudy wealth in Houston, but
for sure.
There was a lot of wealth in Houston. But no, when I mean, I'll remember years and years ago, I went to someone's house that he had like a beautiful Land Rover, and I'm like, oh my God, and lived in a tiny single apartment, like tiny closet apartment, and he did this specifically to impress other people.
Right.
Like that was his thing. And that doesn't work in some industries, but boy, it sure works in Hollywood, because people will look at just the external and think that's that. That's why I think there's a lot of people who move through here quickly and who actually have failed this and that. And I think there's a song by the Go-Go's. They said, discarded stars and worn-out cars litter the streets of this town, which I always thought was a great description of LA.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a difference between just wanting to have a small apartment and a nice car and just doing it because you need to impress.
Yeah, and that was purely for that reason.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a good question whether that, and my daughter, who's 23, would say LA is different than other places, like in terms of what the kids are seeing, what they're around, what they want. It's a little intense, I would say.
Yeah, I think it is.
So, you know, speaking of that, a lot of your money beliefs come from your past, come from your upbringing or whatever.
Yes.
And I really kind of wanted to address that a little, because I talk about it a lot, but I don't really know how that works. Like, how do those messages you hear at home when you're growing up, you know, they say that a lot is kind of piled up in your subconscious by age 7. I don't know, maybe you could talk about this a little, because you do hear a lot, you take a lot in, and then you carry that with you into adulthood, at least with respect to money.
Well, we have, when we're born, we have these critical periods. We have these periods where we have very intense learning. The kind of, I want to say, tattoo our brain, or they brand our brain, like they put these thoughts in that are gonna stick. Basically, our brain is kind of learning the outside world, and it develops an operating system to be able to negotiate the outside world. So when you're very young, you have to do a lot of learning very quickly. So kids do that primarily through what they call observational learning, which is watching their parents. They're through instruction, which is going on. They also have their peer group and parents. We also have TV, and you also have like your neighborhood and all these different places you're learning about money and what that is. So money is one lesson you're learning during that time. I mean, a phrase that I will still hear in the rest of my life is, we can't afford that. We can't afford it. Like, that's all I grew up with. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. And to the point that I remember when I joined Boy Scouts, and I went into the meeting, and they gave us a list of all the things we had to buy, like sleeping bag and, all the things you do for Boy Scouts. Right. And I just left, and I never went back. And I told my parents, no, we can't afford it. Because, but I did, at the time I did feel sad, but it wasn't like I felt sad. I just felt bad that we couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. Like, I got branded that was what was going on. So, and I lived around people who had a great deal of money. So that, that dichotomy is kind of rough sometimes, I think. And I didn't realize that till later. So we all develop these beliefs early on. Mm-hmm. We also have critical periods when there's any kind of trauma. We also will go through learning. So if you can go, like you had talked about that big, on a previous podcast, that big tax bill that you got.
I never forgot.
Yeah, but that was a learning point for you. It kind of got tattooed on your brain. Now I have this particular learning point, and that belief system then changed, and you changed your behavior as a result. So we can have these things go on throughout our lives, where we continually kind of reconfigure the software. We get new versions. And money beliefs are all a part of that.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think that's really interesting. I also think, like any belief, I mean, this has been my stance anyway, is that, any belief is yours to change. I mean, you kind of, even though it's ingrained and you heard it and it's repetitive and, it's carved some, neural pathway or whatever, you can...
Well, I mean, you're probably seeing my hesitation, because I'm like, it's not that easy.
No, and I'm not.
Here's the thing. Here's how I liken it. I'm going back to the freeway example. I do this with my clients. We're just sick of the freeway. But I'm like, okay, you can always learn a commute to go home. We can build a second freeway that's better, that's faster, that's more efficient. And we'll build that freeway. Okay. But every now and then you're going to be driving along, and you're in that mindless spot, and you just go down the old freeway, or you just miss the old freeway, or you just wanted to get off somewhere on the old freeway. So bottom line is, the brain will never let go of those old beliefs, because the brain always believes one day it might need them. I've heard people say that's not the case, but we already know there's this thing called diathesis stress. Well, it's just stress diathesis. Basically, it's that whenever you have a kind of big setback or big stress, you go into this old belief system. So it's like you regress. You know how when you go home to visit your parents, and you're like, all comes rushing back. You feel like, ugh.
Yeah, you feel like a little 10-year-old in your house again. I know. I worry about that. My 26-year-old son moved home because he's going to go back to school, and I mean, I'm trying to be cool about it, but I keep thinking, I hope he's not like feeling like we think he's like the same little guy he was. I'm trying to treat him like an adult, but it's just weird. Yeah, I feel like you have to go back, I think, a little bit when you move in.
True, very true. But I think also, the fact he moved back in with you at 26 must mean, that may not be all bad. That means home was a good place.
It's cheaper too. Yeah.
Well, there's that. Yes.
Well, I think that's really interesting because I do think that's where it starts. And I think people are somewhat unconscious about it. They're not really aware that they think these beliefs are like, they're sort of like facts. Like we should, you should never really spend money on whatever, because you could make an argument at any stage with any amount of money that you can't afford it. It's one of those things.
That is true.
I mean, what does that even mean? If you want to save all your money, then you can't afford it even if you make, $500,000 a year or whatever. So it is kind of interesting that you could take that with you and just be very frugal for the rest of your life, whether you really want to or not. It's sort of an automatic.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I don't think I'm frugal. That's the problem, I think. I think I don't have a great relationship with money, but I think it's much better. I think I've had to be, when I've been very sane about money, it's been because I've been practical. And like I'm going to be very practical about this is what I can afford. This is this.
Okay.
And so be it. And like, that's that. And I try to be more in that space.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, frugal, like I was talking to Brian. I was talking to poor Brian because I'm like, Uber Eats is expensive. I always get Thai food from this place. I got it from Uber Eats thinking there'd just be a delivery charge because it was raining. I'm like, why not? It was like $30 more for the same order. And I'm like, okay, that maybe not.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing that I'm having to go, okay, now I just need to take that little car ride to the Thai place when I want to get Thai food.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not frugal either, but I feel like I like what you said because being practical somehow takes some of the emotional stuff away, which means some of those messages aren't really impacting your decision making. You're just making a practical decision sort of outside of your emotions, it sounds like, or outside of some of this self-talk or whatever, or maybe you've just moved past it at this point. I mean, it's...
No, are you kidding? Who moves past it? That's that. We talked about that generalized conditioned reinforcer that money stands for everything else.
Yeah.
But one thing we can talk about is that money even stands for some very core things for every human being. For some people, it stands for safety. For some people, it stands for security. For some people, it's freedom. Maybe it's justice. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's authority. Whatever it is.
Right.
Money has different meanings to different people. And I think for me, it's freedom because I think I often saw it a bit as a cage that we didn't have money. And so when I have had money, I've spent it and sometimes recklessly.
Right.
And so I've had to watch that behavior because I understand a little bit better what's going on. It doesn't mean that urge still isn't there for me to break free and run away and go on an expensive vacation and whatever.
But do you guys think that we like should have those moments in life? Because you know how there are those people that never spend and just save and save and save, but never really get to experience life.
I think that's an amazing question. There's this whole FIRE movement. I don't know if you've read much. I think it's oh gosh.
First in, retire early.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So it's about killing yourself to save, don't go out, don't do it. I had a great guest named Grant Sabatier who wrote a book on this, and he, straight out of college, and he grew up in a family that was somewhat poor, and so there was this kind of bigger desire to not have that in his life in the future. So, save everything, don't do anything, and then be able to retire at 40, which I have a whole issue with it because I don't know what the heck you're going to do in retirement at 40.
No, psychologically, keep your brain, keep it sharp, baby. You can work less, but keep it sharp.
Yeah, you have to have purpose. I'm big on the blue zones these days and like having that meaning in your life and purpose. I personally think you can get a lot of that from work. Now, maybe that means you can do anything you want for work and not worry about. I think that is one of the points, is then you can go and work and, be whatever you want, because it doesn't matter anymore. You've already saved enough money, but
yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. But I don't think to your point, personally, I don't really think missing your life is the goal. Like, that makes it, to me, too much about money and not enough about living or being free or anything. It's you're chasing, a bank balance or something. And I feel like that there's no relationship there with money. Mm-hmm. There's a goal. There's a number you're trying to achieve. But I feel like if you have this relationship, that's something, it's like your ally in life. It's a tool that's helping you live your life. It's not something you're going after in isolation. I don't know if I'm describing this very well, but...
No, I think what you're talking about is extremely important. The cost of that lifestyle seems so big to me. And I think of I couldn't afford things when I was young, and when I was in my 20s, basically, because I had to work to go to school. So right. I worked between 20 and 40 hours a week. I'd have rotations to do. I'd have my schoolwork. I basically never slept. And I always used to joke that I spent my 20s in the library in Houston, the University of Houston, looking over at my desk. I had a desk at the library, and it overlooked the air conditioning vents.
I was going to say, it's good to be inside in the summer in Houston.
Oh yeah, that is true. But the bottom line is, I look at people in their 20s and they're out having fun and doing things, and I'm like, I still got to do things. I still did. I still went to concerts once in a while. I'd go out once in a while. But in many ways, it was really tough, and I can't imagine doing it. And I did it with a purpose in mind. Right. I guess if you're doing it with the purpose of retiring early, that's good. But I do sometimes regret not having a more full-bodied experience in my 20s.
Yeah. I almost, if I can recollect it, but I think he sort of, at this point, he's really set up and everything. But I do think even he looked back, Grant, and thought, I could have gone out a little bit more with my friends, but, I almost hate to say anything because I don't think I'm a great example because I do spend money on memories, on we like to go on, if the kids still want to go with us. So we do a pretty fancy trip once a year because it's it's 10 days where our family is together and we're actually enjoying each other and nobody's distracted by other. I mean, to me, it's worth a whole lot of money. Like, could I put that and invest it and retire earlier? Probably. But
the memories, I feel like, make you happier.
I think they make you happier. I don't want that austere a life where it's all about, because I'm not sure where that gets you. I don't know. So you can live a little better when you're 80? I mean, I'm not sure.
But what if you don't even get to 80?
Well, that's a
whole thing where you save all this money and sometimes these people go before they get to even enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it like a relationship. I mean, you're not going to find somebody, you really like and just say, I'm going to work really hard so in 40 years I can, take you out on a great vacation. I don't know. But I'm sure people would be hearing this going, oh, well, you'll never make any money that way.
Please don't go out there and act crazy.
I mean, you just never know. I think everything's a bit of a risk. There's a risk. There's a risk benefit, thing, and and you have to see what kind of risks you're willing to take.
That's right.
And some, like I hate to bring it back to graduate school, but it was so much of a part of my life at the time. But I remember watching people get all the way to the PhD, all the way to the dissertation, and eat it, and not finish. Right. And I'd be like, oh my God. I would, I wanted to go and rescue them because but I'm sure that was a life choice they made. I mean, the dissertation, why they put the most difficult thing at the very end, I'm not really sure, but it is the most difficult thing and it really is a mountain to climb. They basically are preparing you for that. But the bottom line is some people don't do it. And so they graduate with all that school debt on all that time, and then they didn't get the thing that they were going for.
Right.
But someone could make a different case to me back. They could say, well, that was an experience that I valued a lot. It really taught me a lot of lessons. I really went on a different path after that and really caused my life to change in a positive way. And so,
I have that exact example in my life because my dad came from an immigrant family. They said, you have to be a doctor. That's your choice. You have one choice. And he started to go to medical school, really hated it. So he went into dentistry, became an orthodontist. And I mean, he had to be valedictorian of his high school so he could get a scholarship. He had to do everything his dad said to do, and he did. And went to Cornell, went to University of Michigan, went to MIT, went to Harvard. I mean, he went all over the place.
Okay, these are like the top schools in the nation.
No, he was brilliant. He's honestly the smartest person I've ever known.
Wow.
He did what he was told. He became an orthodontist. He worked about 16 years. He was very successful, but he was never really. That wasn't his dream. His dream was to do research. You're a big research guy. He wanted to do research more than anything. So he got kind of depressed in like his 40s, I guess. And I still remember him just kind of walking the beach, like he was. Anyway, so he changed his whole career, and he was doing really well. He decided to go back to school. That's actually when he went to MIT, was to do postdoctoral stuff, and became a cell biologist and became a professor and a researcher.
Wow.
But our life, really changed. It was a big financial hit. And he built a whole new career, built it back up, did great, had a wonderful second half of his life. And, a lot of people told my mom, oh, my God, you should divorce him. You're going to have no money and your whole lifestyle is going to change. And my mom wasn't that person, so she obviously supported him. But he was so happy in his research career.
That's so great.
Did we forego did he forego a bunch of money? I mean, yes. Did it? Was it the right thing to do? Yes. So brought him a lot of happiness and satisfaction. And my mom used to always say, I don't think he would have lived very long if he'd stuck with the original career.
You can't tell. I just got goosebumps. That's amazing. That's a beautiful, beautiful story.
And it's part of where, that was my experience. So now it's hard for me to say, save all your money, don't do anything. I'm just
crazy because I was in the military and I was going to re-enlist because I had really great opportunities, like opportunities people would kill for.
Really?
And I decided because I had a year left on my contract when I had that opportunity, and I could either get out in like a few months or re-enlist for another 5 years, but I would have no life. Like I would not be able to tell anybody what I was doing or anything.
Oh, wow.
And I decided to get out because I'm so much happier. Like I genuinely don't think I would have been this happy if I would have stayed in and re-enlisted, even though there were amazing opportunities. And even now I still sometimes think back about it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I know I'm so much happier here,
I love that. And I guess all of this just speaks to, you can't really make these decisions just to get money. I mean, there are lots of ways to get money, but
I let go of the safety net. It was like a huge safety net being in the military,
So that was a risk.
It was a risk.
And the reward wasn't financial. The reward was happiness, know, which I guess you could make a case that that's financial in the end, but I
even got sick from stress when I was getting out of it because it was such a scary thing to let go of.
Yeah. That's really an interesting story. And your risk reward comment, I have a business coach who I've had for a long time and I love, and for him, that's what it always comes down to. What's the risk? What's the reward? Make a decision. And if you can make a case that the reward is in some way, whether it's money, whether it's happiness, whether it's, health, whatever it is, if the reward is, sometimes it's hard to figure out if the reward is greater than the risk because
you never know.
You never know. But it is a good analysis, I think, to do.
But you're doing what you love now, isn't that right?
Yeah.
And me too.
But I didn't. I had a corporate career where it was. I loved it for certain reasons. I mean, I had worked for great companies, great jobs, but how internally you just know this isn't quite it.
Yep.
So
I think that's why we're all where we are right now.
We all listen to our gut at some level.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Yeah.
In the same place.
I love that, though.
Yeah. We're so out of time, but I'd love to ask one more question.
Please.
If I can.
52. Oh, that's not the answer. Okay.
Yeah, no math questions. You wrote a note down about our environment. So I'd love to talk to you because your environment also impacts what you are able to do with money or like what you feel like you can do. I mean, the Army is a very specific environment with, a lot of rules and boundaries and things. But, how does because I think a lot of times we try to sort of ignore our environment or power through despite an environment.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we can make. One thing I have to give credit to University of Houston on that. I really had no intention of talking about that school, but that was a big issue that we were studying there. One of my advisor, particularly in psychology, was an environmental psychologist. So what does that say? It basically looks at the impacts of environment on all of our behavior. And what it would come down to is for people who are very poor and they go into work late, then you find out that they don't have an alarm clock. And that was the only intervention needed is to buy them an alarm clock, then that's a change of environment that makes a huge impact. And so he would talk about those types of things. But we know environment impacts everything, including where you grow up, all the beliefs we talked about, family, people we relate to, our friends, the town we live in. We live in a crazy town when it comes to money. But also your values are going to be largely based to reflect your environment in many ways. So if you go to church, you might have values that are more similar to the people in that church, if that's your reference group, like the people that you really dig. But if you go into a country club, your values around money might be more reflective of that group of people, and if that's your reference group. So environment continually plays a big role in how we see ourselves and how we behave. And I could go and we could spend all day on that one, but the bottom line is environment is as important as everything else. It is one of the big 5 factors: thoughts, feelings, behaviors, physiology, environment.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting because I was just listening to an interview with somebody and she grew up, maybe it was South Central, I don't remember, but it was an area like that. And her just having this knowing from the time she was little, like, I've got to get out of here. Like, I do not belong here. This will not be good for me. And, it's interesting that some people know, some people don't.
I felt the same way when I was in high school in Texas. I
really?
just felt that I didn't belong there. Like, I knew I was there because we moved there, but I knew I had to get out of there.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I just felt like I just didn't belong.
We could do a whole other show on how when those intuitive, inner knowings are actually something to follow or not follow, or like, that's so interesting to me.
That's a great question.
I know. Well, I hate to do it. I've never had a time when I thought, I could do one of those like 4-hour like podcasts, but I think I could today, but I'm not going to.
We were talking about that today.
Well, you just keep talking till you like run out. But anyway, this has been great. You guys are amazing, and thank you so much for coming on and digging a little deeper into all this mind stuff that happens with money, because I think as much happens in your mind with money as, happens in your physical world.
I agree. I 100% agree. And you're going to join us for our show, so people want more of you. More of me or more of Brian? I don't know.
More of us.
More of us. More of this trio. We'll have another show available.
Well, please tell people how to get a hold of you, how, your show. Let them know how to.
Oh, it's same place as yours. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Off the Couch with Dr. Greg.
Yay. Okay. And I've been listening. It's really fun. And one of the things I really love about your show are the studies, and you make them really interesting, and they are really interesting. You find really interesting studies to talk about, and I love that because I mean, there's a lot of talk out there, but not so much that's actually reviewing research that's really interesting.
Thank you. No, I love research, and I want it to be accessible to the common person. Like people were like me when I was a little kid, and I was so hungry for knowledge, but I didn't have the scientific background. So we try to talk about it from just kind of a normal person standpoint.
Yeah. No, I love it though, and I feel like we all share things that we're hearing on whatever, but I'm happy now because when I share those pieces of information, they've got some actual backing.
There you go.
Yeah, some fact. So anyway, okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
I really am honored that you came on. It was really fun having a bigger group and be in studio. Almost everybody's been virtual. So, and audience, thank you. We love having you listen to the Money and You show. If you feel so inclined, please leave us a like, a review, share with your friends. We would love to continue to build the show and have more wonderful guests on, like Dr. Greg and Brian. And thank you so much. We'll see you next week.